Any thoughts about the weaknesses?
Yes, a lot of them, I'm sure. Uh, Impatience in my DNA. Sometimes people feel I'm running much faster than them and don't give them enough time to unrealistic time standards sometimes of expectations. I tend to have some of our best performing people in the unit around me, both for coaching them and having them. So when you have someone who's not really performing as well, I think he finds it difficult working with me.
Right.
Now that could be a signal for him to improve, or that could be a signal to leave.
To move on.
But I have done that. I think one of the things I have sometimes over years seen, when we have to remove someone from the leadership position, we sometimes take too much time on it. We sometimes dwell on it, think about it, while he's this and while he's that. I think that, now I look back, sometimes should have been done much faster.
Is that something that
now it's come probably over years, but I'm clinical now when I have to get someone to leave.
Right.
But initially it takes time. You think about it too much and you just waste that much more time.
Well, it is, of course, a very difficult decision, always.
It is.
And it is a natural tendency to not want to deliver the very bad news. But as you say, sometimes it's better to get it done with and move on.
I think that's something which was a weakness.
So one of the things, just by way of summary, before I move on to another domain, it seems to me one of the greatest strengths you're talking about is, on the one hand, a concern for people, particularly developing your people, but also a strong concern for results. And it's not one or the other, but both. Would that be a fair summary?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I tend to keep both in mind when we are doing anything.
Indeed. You had mentioned in passing, Girija, in an earlier answer, role models. And I wondered if there is any one person or more than one person, either in real life or in the world of literature, who has actually been a role model for you. Would you say, who is the person or persons and how that has influenced you in your journey as a leader?
Yes, I've had role models. I suppose all of us look to role models to benchmark ourselves and see what we think are the best. And in different aspects, there are different role models, really. When I look at my father, who was a very successful civil servant, the integrity and openness came from him. He's a strong believer in that. When I look at some of my bosses in the bank and then in TCS, I used to wonder why they became bosses. That's where the question used to start. What do they have that made them bosses? And listening capability.
Very interesting.
Is something I always saw in all my role models who were bosses. Amazing. The successful ones would say less and hear more. I tried doing it many times, but I think sometimes I'm impatient. I think that has been certainly, both 2 or 3 of my bosses in the bank and TCS have been very, very good listeners. They're very successful people. They built big businesses in and out of the organizations, and listening skills and motivating skills of their people, getting the best out of them, was really where the role model was.
Well, that's a very, very fantastic insight. Sometimes I myself have been the beneficiary of this. Sometimes when we are getting along with our lives, getting along with our careers, from time to time, some of us are fortunate enough to find someone who actually takes on the role of a mentor. It's really a two-way choice. In a sense, you seek to be mentored and he or she seeks to mentor. Did you ever have any mentors? And again, what was the role this mentor or mentors played in your career?
I think I was lucky in having some bosses who were very keen to develop me. I think they saw in me a potential, and they naturally became the mentors in the organization. And I have had my share of mentors. I have had respect for them. I think in mentor, it's a two-way street of developing mutual respect for each other, understanding the counsel as it is given, whether it is good or bad. The trust that a mentor develops with you. So I've had mentors, and I think they have developed my leadership styles very substantially. I don't think no one ever comes with a leadership style. It evolves, and mentoring helps the leadership style to develop, especially managing people.
So you see really multiple mentors over time.
Few mentors
Yeah.
over time, and they have helped develop the leadership style.
Is it that no one particular person stands out above the others, or?
No, there are 2 or 3 of them who have been my mentors in different phases of life, and I have learned a lot from them.
All right. As you went through your leadership journey, as I said, we are talking today at a phase in your career where you've already achieved a great deal, and you still have many good years ahead of you. Do you ever remember making conscious decisions based upon your experiences, based upon role models or mentors, to consciously change your leadership style? If you did, would you talk about that a little bit?
I think some of the changes come with age as well, and the role that you play. I think when I was running an organization at a middle management level, there was a different leadership style, just short term. As I became heads of units, as I became heads of a whole business which I had to create, like when I created the mutual fund in India as an executive chairman. Clearly the leadership style, you're starting with zero, a page which is just white. It's challenging. Where do you start? You're going to convince your people who are going to join you that this will be a great business.
But also very exciting, as you had
And
pointed
also
out.
exciting. So you got to actually get them
Yeah.
to see your vision. Why are you so excited? And if they're not excited, that business won't take off. So I think the leadership style changes when you are doing at different levels, roles of different levels. And the most challenging aspect of it is especially when you're doing a ground up new business. That is the crux of any leader. Can he build a new business from scratch? I have done about 4 or 5 like that. That's something which I always think has been the high point when I look at not what my titles were, but where we built from scratch businesses.
And that perhaps is where the inner entrepreneur comes out and plays a role. Let's switch gears a little bit, Girija. I'd mentioned to you right in the beginning that the study which this interview will be a part of is of Indian and Chinese business leadership. Obviously, this is something that has influenced you as well, but if you focus on Indian business leadership or Chinese business leadership, and I'd want you to talk about both, what are some of the most unique or even most distinctive aspects of this Indian or Chinese business leadership style? And what have been some of the main sources of influence for each country? I'm sure you have a vast amount of rich experience in both countries, but just start laying it out for each country.
Yeah. Let me just take what are the common aspects to both. I say that in China as well, we built a business from scratch there. And of course, India, where I worked sometimes. Both countries over the last 15 to 20 years have taken growth for granted. It's a given in the mindset of leadership. Double digit, triple digit, that doesn't matter in particular areas. So both are highly aggressive in terms of growth parameters. When I look at our budget numbers, a 15% growth in our jargon is called flat line.
Interesting.
Anyone who says that, we say this is a flat growth. And a lot of Chinese say the same thing. You don't hear that in the West, naturally, because it's a slow growing economy. So both countries and the manager and leadership have to struggle with growth, high growths. And these high growths then require you to do many things for it to happen. Orderly growth. You do not want a disorderly growth. So one is that both are struggling with growth. Second, both are also globalizing. I'm not talking about those companies which are globalizing. Not everyone is globalizing, but the big companies in both countries are globalizing because they are seeing.
And TCS certainly.
And we, of course, are in 45 countries, so
Right.
so globalization is. And I'm seeing it in China now. Many of our customers are going global. And the questions we ask them, how will you support me globally? That's the question I'm asked all the time.
Yeah.
What are the challenges you faced when you went global? Because you are kind of ahead of others in doing it. So both countries, organizations are looking to globalize. Both countries are looking at aggressive growth. So that's common in that. Also, at least in India, and to some extent because private sector is not so dominant in China as yet, concern for all stakeholders. In Tata Group, we of course have a huge corporate social responsibility story, which is part of our DNA, so looking after other aspects. So there's a stakeholder management, which is more comprehensive. I hear the same thing in China. There are issues of labor, there are issues of government, there are issues of poverty, there are issues. We have to look at it. It is not just a bottom line driven Q and Q growth of EPS.
Yeah.
That is only one part of the story.
And not just shareholder wealth maximization either.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So both sides look at that. We are also short of people in both sides. Meaning, and we're not short of people, we've got $1.5 billion people each in both countries. But qualified leadership, qualified management ranks are scarce in both countries. Because the rest of the world has also assumed that there is some good talent in these countries, that they also pick them up. So it's a hunting ground for everyone. A lot of multinationals are run by good people from these countries. So trying to develop management and leadership becomes a big challenge for senior leadership. You can't divorce it. You will not grow orderly and the metrics that you see is unless you develop your team simultaneously. This is so HR and developing of people and leadership takes a long time. And it takes a lot of time of ours in both countries. China has a bigger problem sometimes because they are growing so much faster. And this is a challenge that we hear from them. And when I talk to our customers, and our own team in China talks to me about this problem. And I talk to them a lot about this. So these are 3 or 4 common things.
What about the different things?
The differences are obviously, as you would expect, a little bit of history and a little bit of culture. So in India, both of us have common sort of colonial experiences. And then, we roughly, both of us came out of the colonial experience as independent countries around the same time. And the difference in India is that our the Commonwealth system of government allowed us to internationalize much faster our legal systems, our government, whereas they for a long time were part of a very different philosophy. So we are different in the way we think, different the way they think. It's like the question once I was in one of the mayor in one of the cities asked me the question. He said
in China?
In China, and they were going to give us some award or the other. And during the lunchtime, the first question he asked, "So, Mr. Pande, how did you like Slumdog Millionaire?" So I said, "Yeah, good." He said he also liked it, and he saw it twice with his family. And the third question he asked me, "How did the government allow it?"
Allow the film
to be produced. So I kind of looked puzzled. I said, frankly, I don't think the government knew about it.
Government may not have been aware.
They're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
And even if they were aware of it, there was precious little they could do about it.
That's right.
So you got a mindset which is different in these matters. Second, the Confucian thinking which dominates Chinese mindset in everything they do has a lot of respect for authority and a lot of respect for a certain restraint on leadership. So it's a very top-down driven issue. There are no arguments. And I always have a challenge when I'm with our Chinese team. I want them to argue. I encourage them to argue. I say to them, all knowledge does not reside in me. In fact, the least resides in me. I am here to listen, hear from you. It's difficult. In India, you open a room full of young people and you don't have a chance to talk. You don't have a chance.
You don't have to invite them to challenge you.
You don't have a chance.
Yeah.
So that's two different styles. It is not to say that there are not great ideas coming out in China, but it's just the way you have to address it is different. Say maybe sometimes you have to do it individually in smaller groups. And they come out with as good ideas. I have no issues of one is better than the other. I'm just saying that the mindset of the two management and teams are slightly different when they come to solving problems.
And which would mean you'd have to use different leader behaviors to elicit
That is true.
the ideas.
True. And then if you were implementing something, if everyone has agreed to implement, our China team would execute it perfectly. Absolutely perfectly.
Not the same in India?
Not the same in India. Because they would argue continuously.
Interesting.
And I always remember Amartya Sen's book, The Argumentative Indian.
Right.
They would continuously argue, and you have to keep on arguing with them while you're doing it. Third, I think over years, Chinese have realized the value of delivering on time. It is sacrosanct. In that country, it is sacrosanct. You don't miss deadlines. Whether they're building a bridge or they're building an IT system. The customers expect it. I was asked, we were building a huge system for the Central Bank of China, IT system, massive trading system. They wanted an hour-to-hour project plan.
Hour to hour?
Hour-to-hour project plan in some key
What
areas.
was the length of the whole
It
project?
was 2.5 years.
My God.
It's the main trading system for the Chinese yuan trading. That is how they have built bridges. That's how they have built large organizations and cities with an amazing amount of what I call military precision. Indian organizations don't yet know the value of that. I think they're learning, but if you ask me the difference, the execution capability in China is absolutely outstanding.
Now, is there any potential downside to this command and control, military precision as you're talking about?
I think they are realizing that there are downsides. Creativity doesn't flower easily. New ideas are not expected from people who face customers that easily. And I think many of them are also understanding that while there are upsides to this strategy in terms of project implementation, there could be downsides. In India, we find a lot more of ideas coming out. Some crazy, some worthwhile, but they're coming out all the time because I think we either allow it or it's part of our DNA argument, and the leader has to actually address those arguments. You cannot just say, I am the leader. That is unacceptable to an open style that you're developing. So you have to argue with all of them. It takes much longer.
Let me bounce something off you. It seems to me, based on my knowledge of both China and India, and most recently, my years in Singapore, the whole notion of social order in the Chinese world is really quite different than in the Indian world. Do you have views on that?
As I said, there is a much larger emphasis given to order.
Right.
I was once telling a senior Chinese official about how the Indian trinity of gods of creation, destruction, and managing it
Brahma,
is
Vishnu, and
is the
Mahesh.
part of
Yeah.
our psyche.
Yeah.
And that's a very unusual concept to them. It's a very unusual concept because order is so much part of the preserving order and running it in order is so much part of that. So I think it's around the different experience that they've had, the Confucian style and the whole Confucian mindset, along with the 50 years of a very hard-driven communistic system, has probably brought that.